So you want to play Shifting Shadows. Or perhaps you accidentally clicked on this video. Either way, let's open the box. Every game comes with a full set of rules, but reading is hard, so this can be your shortcut. The game is a battle royale, and we play until one champion remains. Speaking of champions, you will play as one of 8 mighty heroes. Well, 7 heroes and an accountant named Dave. Brought before the mighty Skeleton King, you must fight for your life. In the top well above the dice are 8 oversized cards. These are the hero cards. Lay them out for everyone to see and grab a 20-sided dice. We are about to do a draft, so make a game plan. For this hypothetical game, we will have 3 players. Player 1, let's call him Bruno, rolls an 18, pretty high. Player 2, let's call her Marceline, rolls an 11, pretty mid. Player 3, let's call them Calvin, rolls a 19, epic. Calvin was the highest, so they will draft first. Bruno was second, so he will draft second, and Marceline was third. This process would carry on to 6 players, but I trust you can do it with just this example. They must choose 2 things, their turn order and their hero. Calvin drafts their favorite hero, Flavin Philbin. He draws cards and lots of them. Bruno drafts Glycinda Hallmoth. Never hurts to have a safety cushion as she can come back to life with her special power. Marceline drafts Zerafroth the Zesty. Deck thinning can be very useful in this game. Players keep their hero cards in front of them, then the draft snakes. That means the lowest pick goes first now. Marceline wants to go first. That's her turn order. Bruno wants to go second. Calvin will go third. Now we know how the game starts and whose turn is when, but how do we set it up? Every game will come with the cards in the same order shown here, so follow along. The top right well has half the tier 1 cards. It also has some cards with mini copies that represent the static cards that are always available for purchase. You can tell it's tier 1 because of the cost, which is the value in the top right. If it is below 9 and not a pack, zing, starter pack, draw, or weakness, it belongs to tier 1. All of the draws and packs are in this pile as well as some zings. Those go in their own pile at the top of the store area. These make up a static list of cards that can always be bought. The tiers rotate availability. More on that in a second. You'll know the rest of the cards are in tier 1 when Trick Shot is at the bottom. In the bottom left well is the rest of tier 1. There are no other cards here, so you can just shuffle the 2 enormous piles together. We'll do that in a second. The top left well is tier 2, and a few zings that pop up after the card with this shield or upon it. Add the zings to the zing stack, and tier 2 can be shuffled in just a moment with the rest of the cards. You can tell the cards are in tier 2 because their costs are 9 to 14. The last well has all of tier 3, which are cards that cost 15 or more, as well as the remaining static cards that are always available for purchase or use. After you have everything in the proper place, it should look like this. Now let's shuffle the cards and see what a turn is supposed to look like. Recall that in the draft, Marceline has chosen to go first, so we can start with her turn. At the start of any player's turn, they must turn over the top cards of the open stores until there are 5 cards in front. Tier 2 is closed until someone falls below 65 hit points, and Tier 3 is closed until someone falls below 35 hit points. So at the start of the game, we only do this for Tier 1. Each player's starting hand is composed of 5 starter packs. Each starter pack grants you 1 power. Power is the currency we use to buy cards and add them to our deck. Remember those costs that we sorted the tiers by a moment ago? Well, cost merely refers to how much power you must pay to gain a card. Marceline decides that since her hero uses the Cry About It bonus action, her deck will revolve around it as well to maximize the effectiveness of using that bonus action. So it makes sense to buy Multiplicity, a card that features that bonus action. It costs 5, so she uses all of her power to gain that card and put it in her discard pile. She then uses her action, Consume Greed. That lets her gain a card, cost 3 or less, and she chooses a pack to have more power next turn. She then uses her bonus action, Replenish Deck, to shuffle her discard pile into her deck. Since her turn isn't over, this doesn't apply to the cards that she played this turn. This lets her make sure that she draws the cards she just bought, since they are the only cards in her discard pile. This is a common trick in the early game, and you should probably use it every now and then. With that, she ends her turn. The card she used goes into her discard pile. She then draws until she has 5 cards in her hand. Wait, but after drawing the 2 cards she just bought, there are none left in her deck. Not to worry. Whenever this happens, you just shuffle your discard pile, and that discard pile becomes your new deck. Here, they are all starter packs, so the shuffling is a little frivolous, but you get the point. Now, it's Bruno's turn. We turn over cards from Tier 1 until there are 5 in front, so just 1 card. It's Multiplicity again, and it seems like you're going to have to really shuffle these cards the first time you play. 5 starter packs for Bruno, so he has 5 power like everyone else. Bruno has some ideas of combos he wants to work out later, so he buys a draw for 3 power, leaving 2 power left over. There is nothing left that costs 2 power, so this will be wasted at the end of his turn. He uses his action to consume greed and buy a pack for 3 cost. Then, like Marceline, he uses the bonus action to replenish his deck and make sure he draws the new cards. He ends his turn and draws until he has 5 cards. Last, we see Calvin's turn. There are already 5 cards in Tier 1, so no need to flip any over. Their starting hand is also 5 starter packs. Calvin is bored by the repetition in cards due to the poor shuffling and uses a different bonus action. They use Time Loop to move the current cards in the Tier 1 to the Tier 1 discard pile and flip 5 new cards down. It's a great way to look for cards or block an opponent from getting a card. Calvin buys Cost of Safety to block future damage and uses their action to buy a pack like everyone else. Now, we get to notice the first use of a hero power. Flavin Philbin draws 7 cards instead of 5, and then he discards 1. You can get rid of whichever card you like, but Cost of Safety is probably best because the damage options next turn will be pretty limited, and it's nice to start getting your power production scaled up over the game. An important thing to remember is card types. It's the letter underneath cost. I is for instant, S is for spell, and C is for constants. Instants can be played whenever you want if the effect can apply. Spells are only for your turn. Constants remain in play and can be used once per each player's turn unless the card says otherwise. They have a number to represent how many uses they have, and we suggest using one of the D6s to keep track of remaining uses. Once it gets to 0, the constant goes in your discard pile after your next turn ends and not before. It's like you played a card that turn for the purposes of the rules. Let's revisit Calvin on a later turn, and now we see they have a constant in play. Fittingly enough, it's Lucky Axe. Here they have 7 at power, enough to buy another Lucky Axe and use our action to get a pack. Now we're going to time loop backwards and leave those boring cards from before for the other players. We use a duration on our constant and tick down the dice to keep track. We deal the damage to Bruno and call it a turn. And then at the end of our turn, we draw our 7 cards and discards our 1, and then we refresh the store for the next player. Now let's review another start of a turn in the game with Tier 2 open. All we have to do differently is make sure that each tier has 5 cards in front. Tier 1 already does, and now so does Tier 2. When Tier 3 opens, we will do the same thing. Now, let's go over some clarifications, actions, bonus actions, and powers. Prep Work is a pretty simple spell. It's supposed to just let you prepare a card for your next turn. So you choose one of the cards in your hand, you place it face down in front of you. If it allows you to play it during other players' turns, you may do so. Otherwise, it resolves normally. And when I say normally, I just means that at the start of your turn, it will be the first card that is played. And if you go to the turn order section of the rulebook, you can see that the first thing that happens is you refresh the stores, you cast any prepared spells, and then you can play by use actions, powers, and bonus actions in any order you wish. Now, the action, draw. You draw a card. No, that's pretty simple. Cleanse. You must do this before playing any cards using any actions or bonus actions or hero power. You ignore all current non-damage effects from other players' cards. For the next round, be immune to non-damage effects. End your turn immediately. So it's a real commitment. Test Fate. Play the top card of the cheapest tier deck that still has cards in the library. This ability is wasted if it's a constant. Return it after it is used. And that's returning it to the top of the deck. Consume Greed. Without using power, gain any card cost 3 or lower. This is not combinable with hero powers. Blood Money. Convert all the power that you have this turn into damage. You may deal 1 damage for every 4 power you have. This does not round up. So if you have 11 power, that would only translate to 2 damage, and the other 3 power would have to be spent on something else. Then we have lesser powers, which takes any bonus action as an action instead of your regular list of actions. Your bonus actions are Replenish Deck, which we demonstrated earlier, shuffling your discard pile into your deck. Cry About It, which is where you taunt your opponents or compliment your own deck. You trigger any effects from cards or heroes that mention the Cry About It bonus action as well. An example of this in action could be, dude, my deck's way better than yours. Or, ugh, really? You played that last turn? Yikes. Now, the last bonus action, which we demonstrated before, is Time Loop, and it essentially just lets you move the cards currently in the store forwards and backwards in units of 5 at a time. This is only done to 1 store at a time. There are a few additional actions and abilities that can only be taken as the result of a card played. I trust you can figure those out once you encounter those cards. The last notes are just a few clarifications. When a player dies and the game isn't over, meaning that there's 2 or more players left, you take all the cards that the player who just died had, and you return them to the discard piles of the stores that they started the game in. On top of the discard pile, you also return any zings, packs, or etc. to their supply piles. There is also a card called Flex Noticness, which is broken into 5 different cards. They are spread out across the different tiers. We have Flex, Sn, O, D, and Snus. These cards have no effect unless they are played in the same singular turn, but those cards are meant to bypass all immunities, and you kind of just win the game by dealing 100 damage to everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this. It has been wonderful to make this game for you. And in the rulebook, you'll see that I offer the ability to reach out to my personal email. That is no longer available, sadly, but you can reach out at games@skeletonenchantygames.com. There's a lot of depth to this game, and so I hope you spend the time reading the rulebook and playing a few rounds to really see all that it has to offer. I hope you enjoy the game.